Good afternoon, New York, and the rest of our listeners around the globe. My name is June Stoyer, and I'm the host of the Organic View Radio Show. Our podcast is available on iTunes, Zune, and you can also visit our website at www.theorganicview.com. If you'd like to be on the show or would like to find out about sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at questions@theorganicview.com. Today's show is sponsored by coronatools.com, the nation's leader in garden and landscaping tools. Listeners of the Organic View can receive 20% off their coronatools.com purchase by using the coupon code ORGVIEW. That's ORGVIEW. For more promotional offers, please visit our website at www.theorganicview.com. And don't forget to check out our contest section.
Cocktails have come such a long way, and there's so many exciting ways to spruce them up. On today's show, best-selling author, the healthy party guy, as I like to call him, Mr. John Schlimm is going to share his tips for enjoying summertime cocktails. So I'd like to welcome to the show, John Schlimm.
Hey, June. It's great to be with you. Cheers.
Cheers, John. You are my favorite healthy party guy. You are the man. I wish I went to college with you. You probably would have made college life so much healthier and more exciting just because you know so much. You're like a walking encyclopedia when it comes to cocktails of any kind.
Well, I believe that life is meant to be a celebration. No matter what you're doing, life is so short, and we need to celebrate and find joy in everything. And certainly, if you enjoy a cocktail every now and then, that will certainly help.
I couldn't agree more. John, one of the hottest spirits is moonshine.
Mm-hmm.
How do you incorporate moonshine into recipes without getting totally drunk?
Well, if it's a cocktail recipe, that might be a lost cause. I think you're headed for a beautiful buzz. But certainly when it comes to food recipes, which, when I wrote the Tipsy Vegan years ago, that was my first plant-based cookbook. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to contribute something new to the discussion of plant-based foods. And I thought, what could be better than adding alcohol to plant-based dishes to really get everyone to enjoy them even more, whether you lead a plant-based lifestyle or not. And so with that book, I added beer and wine and vodka and whiskey and sherry and rum and, everything. The whole liquor cabinet was added to different dishes. But moonshine, which is the topic of my next book, which is coming out in October, that book was, just this beautiful challenge where I got to really experiment not only with moonshine in cocktails, which we'll talk a little bit about, but also putting it into a couple food dishes. And I think the easiest dish probably to use it in, if someone wants to just experiment, would be in a vegetable stew or a vegetable soup, and just put in a little. And I'm talking about some of the flavored moonshines that are out there naturally, but the alcohol part for the most part burns off during the cooking process, so you don't have to worry too much. If you're getting drunk off of a vegetable soup with moonshine in it, you have bigger problems than the moonshine, I think.
With regards to using alcohol in cooking, and let me tell you something, I was so grateful for that interview because I learned so much from you. And I remember I was given a bottle of White Zinfandel, I think it was, and I was actually going to just toss it down the drain. And I didn't even want to compost it. It's just not something that I would drink.
I remember this, yes.
Yeah, and I actually used it in a red sauce, and I was so grateful to you because I would have tossed it otherwise. So the things that you're doing are just tremendous. I mean, you really have so much creativity, and you really give people a better understanding of how they can repurpose alcohol into their recipes, whether it's the end of a bottle or if you want to give an old recipe a new flair.
Absolutely. And, I believe that it's such a waste and a tragedy and heartbreaking to see any alcohol, even bad alcohol, be thrown out. I can't bring myself to do it. But, again, life is too short to drink alcohol that is not good. So I have found a way to repurpose the bad alcohol, especially, around the holidays. People love to give you homemade wines and different wine. And oftentimes these wines just aren't very good. Sometimes they are, and people are getting a little bit better at making them at home and that's fantastic. But if you do get that bottle of, homemade beer or wine that just isn't that good, try putting it into the next stew that you make or the next sauce that you make. And like you, I think you'll find that you'll be pleasantly surprised.
I like to take beer and make a beer batter out of it. And this is not something that requires eggs, so it is plant-based. And what I like to do, especially this time of the year, is I harvest dandelions. And I'll leave enough of the stem so that I can just easily dip it into the batter and then either fry them or bake them, but it's really best to fry them. And they do taste tremendous, to make these dandelion fritters. And they're actually very healthy, even though it is a fried food. But that's probably one of my most favorite ways to utilize beer, whether it's stale or it's just a beer that I don't particularly care for. And the flavor does come out in the batter. Another thing that I like to do with wine that I'm not crazy about is I will soak portobello mushrooms in the wine. And I'll take the wine and some freshly chopped garlic, and I'll just let it marinate, and the flavor really does come out. And it's just such a clever way to use something that, once again, would wind up either being composted or, wind up down the drain.
Well, I love dandelions. I'm so glad you brought that up. And in fact, I love seeing dandelions in yards. I know most people don't like them. I think they're beautiful in yards, but they're also so delicious. And, getting back to my moonshine book, the first half of the moonshine book is just a really fun retelling of the history of the moonshiners since the beginning of our country. But the second half is a collection of moonshine infusion recipes as well as moonshine cocktail recipes. And one of the moonshine infusion recipes is a dandelion infused moonshine. So there's yet another way to use those beautiful little pinpoints of sunshine that you see in your yard to infuse moonshine to then use in cocktails and in different ways.
That sounds really exciting, and anything with dandelions is always something that I'm going to look into. It's one of the favorite things about the summer that I look forward to. And I just really love your creativity. It's just amazing.
Well, it's fun. It's just so much fun, and it's so fun getting to share these recipes. And in the case of the moonshine book, even the history of the moonshiners, which I found inspiring in many ways, just really kind of fun. I would love to have gotten to hang out with a few of them 200 years ago. But you talk about the American dream. These are folks who were among the first immigrants to come to our country, and they didn't always have it the easiest. They were mostly farmer entrepreneurs, and at times they did break the law, but here 200 years later, they won. They finally achieved the American dream. Now moonshine is totally mainstream. Distilleries are popping up everywhere, and that's why, again, I really wanted to contribute this book to that discussion of moonshine and to this beautiful renaissance that's happening right now. And I think your listeners are just going to love the cocktail recipes. For example, there's one called Moonshine Monkey, which combines a pineapple-infused moonshine with amaretto, rum, ginger ale, orange juice, and pineapple juice, so it's perfect for summer. There's a watermelon martini. We talked in a previous interview about grilling watermelon. Well, now you can put watermelon in a martini that's made with moonshine, also with a little bit of pineapple juice to bring some balance to it. There's even a Smoky Mountain s'more recipe. It's a cocktail, but it uses a marshmallow-infused moonshine along with some chocolate liqueur and chocolate syrup and marshmallows and chocolate bars. So there's a little something for everybody to just sort of further the celebration and people just having a good time with life. Because in those few precious moments when we get to sit down with friends, those moments, or with family, those moments really should be as special as possible. And I'm happy to be the bartender for those occasions.
They sound wonderful, and I'm sure that since you're located in Pennsylvania, if you can check your cookies to Gettysburg, I'm sure that there will be quite a bit of excitement each year as they do the reenactment. And I don't know, there's all sorts of ghost hunters and whatnot that attend those things. And who knows? I'm sure you'll find a descendant somewhere of the last moonshiners of Pennsylvania.
Well, I certainly have channeled the spirit of the moonshiners through the writing of this book, and I wanted to write their history, not so much in an academic way. Those books have been done and they're important and I'm glad they've been done, but that's not me. You know that, and your listeners know that. I wanted to tell the history just as if I was sitting right next to you telling you the history. So the history of the moonshiners that I've written is something that folks can sit down in an afternoon or two, along with one of the cocktails in the back, and just enjoy and laugh their way through from start to finish.
Thanks, John. One of my favorite cocktails during the summer lately has been frosés. And basically it's a combination of taking your favorite rosé. Lately my favorite rosé has been Rosé Piscine, which is a new hot rosé. Last year I was drinking a lot of Notorious Pink. And you can take frozen fruit, like frozen strawberries, put it in the blender, add the rosé, and some ice, and it's just absolutely amazing. And what I like to do, just to add a little bit of a sweetener, is I like to add either the lingonberry syrup or even elderflower syrup, which is actually a very trendy way of sweetening any type of cocktails. So what are some of your favorite ways? And I know that you like to use a lot of fresh fruit. How do you sweeten your cocktails?
Yeah, I pretty much keep it as simple as possible. But what I love about you is you always give me these wonderful new suggestions to try. So all of the syrups that you said sound so delicious, and I think that they would work in so many different drinks. And I think even, pairing some of those syrups with some of the moonshine drinks, because I'm really big about experimenting. I always see the recipes I put out there for folks as just a starting point, just a kind of a suggestion, like here's the basic recipe, but now make it your own. So I encourage people to experiment with the elderberry syrups and the different syrups that you mentioned, because I think you're going to come up with these original and really fantastic cocktails that you're going to really be able to make your own signature cocktails that your guests are going to ask for time and time again. And maybe they even become the secret ingredient that truly makes those drinks yours if you're not willing to share what that secret ingredient is with others.
Well, I just think that if you think about alcohol as food, which is how I was raised to treat alcohol. Doesn't matter if it's a wine or a spirit, but if you treat it as a food, think of it as an ingredient. Last year, I remember one of my favorite cocktails to make was using, I think it was Bird Dog bourbon whiskey, and it was maple flavored. Now, it didn't taste like cough syrup as most people would expect, but this line is kind of interesting. What I did was I made a simple syrup using 1 part of the Bird Dog maple flavored whiskey and 1 part sugar. And I basically boiled it down and so that it became a syrup. And then what I did was I took crushed ice and then drizzled it over the ice, because I have a number of friends who are runners and they don't want the additional fat, but they did want to indulge in an adult dessert. So it's kind of, you have to be creative with some of the things that you're presenting to your guests, especially if you know that they have different health concerns and whatnot. And yeah, you want to include them. And I try to make something that's appealing to everybody, but sometimes I find that when I'm being pushed into trying to find a solution for people who are either watching their weight for one reason or the other, or don't want the fat, or maybe don't even want the sugar. That's where I would incorporate more of the fresh fruit to sweeten whatever the cocktail may be. This way they don't have all the excess sugar.
Well, and I would add to that delicious cocktail that you just described with the maple bourbon and the maple syrup.
It's really good.
It sounds so fantastic. I would suggest that you could either pair that cocktail, as you described it, with a Maibach beer or an amber beer, or add a little Maibach or amber beer to that to make it into an even more spectacular cocktail. So even just starting with that one recipe, there's so many things you can do to even incorporate beer into that to really switch it up every time. There's a local bartender here in my hometown of St. Mary's, Pennsylvania, who used our Maibach beer at my family's straw brewery a few years ago and combined it with a maple-infused bourbon and made the most delicious cocktail, which pretty much is what you're describing, combined with some of the Maibach. And I thought, my gosh, what an amazing alternative to some of the brunch cocktails. Like maybe you're tired of mimosas and Bloody Marys. I could never get tired of those two, but maybe you want to switch it up and you want to add something new to it. That maple-infused bourbon combined with a Maibach, or just as you described it, what an amazing brunch cocktail to serve, to really just dazzle your guests.
I actually used it over a frozen ice that I made that consisted of frozen coconut milk, and I think I added, I think it was a blend. I'm trying to think. Remember what you were saying before about how sometimes you make a great recipe and then you forget how you made it and you try to recreate it and you can't. I should have written down exactly what I did, and quite often I don't, unfortunately. I mean, sometimes it's like, wow, how do I recreate this? And then I'm like, okay, what did I actually put in it? Because half the time I'm just running around trying to get everything together before my guests arrive, and I don't pay attention to everything that I'm putting in it. I'm just hoping that it tastes as good as it seems, or as I imagine it would taste, and for the most part it always does. I mean, I have had a few flops, but not many. Rarely any, but that's how it is for everybody.
Well, that comes with the territory.
But I have to say, if you come to my house, you will never indulge in a poorly orchestrated meal. Everything is always first class. I take a lot of pride in it.
I have no doubt.
And with this particular recipe, the bourbon and sugar syrup combination was just phenomenal as far as an ice cream topper. And it wasn't something that I would think of, but it all began because one of my friends said, something, and she was a friend from high school, and she said, when we were under the drinking age, high school kids and college kids, that's something that they focus on. And then once you become of age, you really don't want to do anything other than go out for coffee or tea. And She said, why is that? So I thought, okay, I can figure out something. And that's kind of how it started. And what I've also learned to do is incorporate different types of wines and spirits into different fresh fruit salads and things of that nature, so it presents a whole different flavor profile from that perspective. So, there's so much that you could do, John?
Absolutely. And I think that, the message I like to put out there is just be adventurous. I think so many people are fearful that they're going to screw up that sauce or that soup or that stew or that glaze or whatever it is. So what if you mess it up? That's fine. Chances are you're not going to. Chances are what's going to emerge is going to be the most delicious thing possible. So I love to have people be adventurous and willing to experiment by using alcohol in different ways, whether it's in food or mixing it together like you have. And that's what life is all about. It's about experiencing new things and then savoring just how delicious life can be, one sip at a time.
Thank you, John. I could not agree more. And if you don't mind me bugging, what is the name of your book and when is it going to be out? And can you just mention your website one more time for our listeners?
Absolutely. So the new book is titled Moonshine, a celebration of America's original rebel spirit. And just like my other books, this is meant to be a party in a book that everyone's invited to just have the best time. It's available for pre-order right now. It's coming out in October. People can learn more about that book as well as my other books if they go to my website, which is johnschlimm.com. JohnSchlimm.com, johnschlimm.com. And I love when I get to connect with people on social media. So I would love to, hear from your readers that way as well when they get to experiment with some of these recipes that we're giving them.
Thank you, John. And folks, please check out the companion article. John has so generously allowed us to share some of his recipes from the new book as a little teaser. And please check out his new book when it comes out this fall. John, are you going to give us a link so that people can pre-order them?
Yes, the book is currently available wherever books are sold for pre-order. So Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, a few other places. Again, if they go to my website, all the links are there so that they can order from their favorite place.
Thank you. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been June Stoyer with the Organic View Radio Show. Have a great afternoon.